And hello and welcome to another movie
What was that?
on Virtual Pubcast. I'm your host, Ken Ekman, and I'm joined by Bill Arsenault
Hey.
and Bill Leon.
Hello.
And we have a movie that we've been trying to discuss for a little while that, just this little movie, a little independent movie called Star Wars: The Last Jedi.
I think you've made. Did he make that joke when we did Force Awakens? You made that joke about something, some other big blockbuster. If it was Star Wars, I don't know.
He definitely did it with this Star Wars. He did it like the last time we were on the Pubcast, I think.
So, before we have other movies to talk about tonight, but we need to get this out of the way because this is probably the most divisive Star Wars movie since the prequels.
Isn't it? I mean, the prequels. I think the prequels had a small smattering of defenders, but for the most part, people were not liking it. And this movie is genuinely divisive. I think it's split almost down the middle.
What I find fascinating about it.
Wait. Before you go ahead, just in response to what you said, I think that Rogue One was more literally split down the middle.
I think this one's a little more unequal.
I think that the people that don't like this are a vocal minority.
So here's what's interesting about it. Star Wars: The Last Jedi has a 91% certified fresh Rotten Tomatoes tomatometer reading, but the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, 51% liked it.
I think that the people that are bad, well, this movie has flaws. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to act like this is some kind of perfect execution of filmmaking.
No, because it's not.
I think that the backlash, the backlash that The Last Jedi has been getting is a vocal minority.
I don't agree with that. I think that there's a very strong split because for just as many people I've heard who loved this movie, there are people like me who kind of, I can't say I hated this movie, but I also, it's the first time I've finished watching a Star Wars movie where I felt, okay, I'm done.
You know, you're not alone in that, Ken, because two people I know, one of whom is a good friend, the other is one of my editors or the editor at Film Threat, Chris Gore, and who I guess is also a friend. He loved the movie, but he was also like, I'm done with Star Wars. Like, this movie was the cap on it. You know, that was it. And the other person, one of my close friends, is so vehemently against this film. I mean, we have been commenting back and forth on it, and he's like, even Mark Hamill hates it. I'm like, well, he clarified his statement. He said that it was taken out of context or whatever, and he meant that he liked it. And that could have been like someone got to him maybe, but I think he genuinely liked the movie. I don't know. I don't think there's a conspiracy there or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But we've been going back and forth about it. So yeah, I would say there is it's more of a split than anything, but it's probably the vocal minority is really like making it a big deal, you know. So
why is this movie so divisive? Let's explore this for a bit.
I would say stylistically it's divisive because it not just we could get into the little nitpicky rules of Star Wars thing, like that there's a sequence midway in the movie or near the end of the movie.
Well, wait.
I'm not going to explain what happens, but I was going to say it's like a showstopper basically, and fans were like, a lot of the hardcore fans were saying that's never been done before in a Star Wars movie. You can't do that. Mm-hmm. The ships don't operate that way. That kind of thing.
What?
Okay. You know, it's like the argument about the technology of the.
So first of all, if you can argue the technology of Star Wars, then you lose me immediately because Star Wars,
it's a fantasy.
Yeah, as a fantasy, you can make up those rules pretty much as you go along, as long as there's nothing that's like a direct contradiction. And thus far, there hasn't been anything, even in this movie, that is like a direct contradiction of a previously established.
I think that all this stuff that you're saying it goes without saying, honestly.
Okay. But I guess what we're getting to, divisive-wise, would be the writing and the style of the film itself. In how it takes these I would call them rather bold and clever chances. Some work, some don't.
Yes.
I'm not going to call
opinion, they
them
all.
clever.
In my opinion, well, that's you. In my opinion, they all worked, but that's just me.
Okay, so I think I'm kind of in between the two of you on this, but I will say
this is going to be an interesting conversation.
The key word when talking about Star Wars: The Last Jedi is subversive. Yeah. Every single time you think you know what's about to happen, they throw a wrench in it and they subvert your expectation. Which, if you know, by the end you're expecting that, I'm just saying, like, that seems to be the engine that this movie is running on for the most part.
It's definitely like like this. I don't know what's the right word for it. Pandora's box. You know, it's like this thing that just keeps kind of molding and changing, and I would agree with you that it does subvert expectations to a detriment and to a success.
Well, yeah, there are multiple, and again, once we get into spoilers, let's kind of just give our opinion on the film in general, and then we'll do spoilers. But
can I just say that as a Star Wars film, if you did not see it opening weekend, then fuck you, spoiler time immediately. I don't.
No. Well, okay.
Well, I wouldn't say
we're late.
Because
we're late reviewing this, but
I saw it this past Saturday, so you know.
If you want to say spoilers right now, then throw it up. Spoilers.
Or was it Friday? I don't know. I saw it last a couple days ago. So, but yeah, spoilers. Let's just make sure it's out of the way, and we can just get into a real meaty discussion.
All right. So I thought the movie was mediocre.
Ooh, man, that hurts.
And actually, a lot of the people that I saw it with I think they were kind of underwhelmed by the film, and I liked it the most out of everyone I saw it with.
I want to know from Ken, because Ken, we on the Pubcast, take directive from you when you're hosting and all that, and you have a rather good way of explaining your stance on film. So I'd like to know why you're feeling that this was an effort of mediocrity.
From pretty much the opening sequence in the film, there was something that just did not feel right to me. There's an issue with the editing. This is a film that jumps all over the place. It cuts from location to location without a lot of regard for what makes sense stylistically, and also we were talking about consistency within Star Wars. There's a certain type of editing that Star Wars has typically followed that this film jumps out of. I think there was only one instance in which there was a swipe cut that was used, and the rest of the time it was very much the same kind of editing you would expect from your Marvel movies. This really felt in a big way it feels like Star Wars: The Force Awakens and even to a smaller extent Rogue One were Disney's way of putting the style of the Star Wars films in terms of editing to bed in favor of Marvel. And
I remember a lot of swipes, a lot of wipes in the movie, not swipes, or maybe swipes. I don't know. I remember a lot of those in the movie, but I remember them being a little bit different than normal. Like, for example, usually they're like swiping left to right or right to left or something. I saw a lot of ones that were like clockwise.
I think
I saw some that were
star wipes.
Yeah, splitting from the middle. Yeah, star wipes, right. I saw some that were just in out of different positions and patterns. It wasn't like all over the place in terms of like being like an out of place transition or cut. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I thought the pacing was spot on. That's just me, though. But
so let me continue a little bit with a little bit more detail.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So I've already covered my issue with the editing. That threw me off to an extent, and the story, the way it was being told, and the arc of it. So the movie opens up with this base evacuation sequence, and Poe is doing his big bombing run, which I that was fine. I was more than happy with that, with the exception of the fact that these bombers are just the worst ships that you could possibly come up with. They move so fucking slowly, which makes no sense in space. Because no matter how big and bulky they are, they should be able to move pretty quickly. Because that,
I think what they were trying to go for was something like the Resistance is on low resources, and then they have to use rinky-dink ships and stuff.
Which they establish later in the film, but in this point, I don't know. And the fact that they had all of those ships when it only took a few of those bombs to do the damage that they were needing to do. So, how come missiles weren't a better option?
I don't know. Maybe they just didn't have them.
Okay. Well,
I don't know. I don't know. I can't.
I mean, like the proton torpedoes that were used in the first Star Wars movie?
Yeah, well,
that takes place like 30 years before the events of this film.
40 years, but
40 years, whatever.
Not that matters. Yeah,
you'd think technology would advance from that point, and
yeah, but again, I think it goes into the Resistance not having the complete backing of the Republic now because the Republic is gone.
Okay, all right.
Starkiller Base, and on top of that, the resources are dwindling after the attack on Starkiller Base. And I think only like a week or two has taken place between the previous movie and this movie. I think it's a very short period of time.
I did not mind the stuff taking place on the island with Luke Skywalker. I thought that stuff was fairly interesting. However, what did bug me was the entire subplot involving
the casino.
Well, the actual casino scene didn't bother me, but the context of their journey being completely pointless aside without any purpose being served in the plot, that was a problem. That made up for a solid 45 minutes of this film.
Well,
the only thing that was accomplished was they saved those weird animal things, at least for the moment. I guarantee you they're going to be hunted down and captured again, or maybe killed.
Can I say I didn't give a shit about that? The only thing that was accomplished was Benicio del Toro was in a Star Wars movie, which is something that none of us saw coming when we went into the theater. Am I correct?
No, I knew he was. I saw his name in the credits. Like,
he was in the credits before, but we were still kind of like, is he going to?
I did not see him coming, and I didn't even give a shit because, like, I figured I was like, okay, he's just acting in this, and I was like, it's Benicio del Toro in a goddamn Star Wars movie,
and his character is completely once again it is not that important to the story, but what he does...
He was charming.
Yes, that's the one thing I will... Benicio del Toro was Benicio del Toroing it up.
Yes.
He was... he had this weird stutter that he was giving himself that... his character...
I didn't even notice that. I've heard people comment about that, and I didn't notice watching...
No, I remember him doing that. It was a little speech tick that he had.
He loves giving his characters vocal mannerisms. I still remember the very first screen performance that I can remember of him is in the James Bond movie License to Kill. He's super young, and towards the beginning of the film, he's he's going to be he's like torturing one of Bond's friends, and he's talking about how they're going to kill the guy's wife. He says, "Don't worry, we're gonna give her a nice honeymoon." And
that's probably what got him that job playing the Wolfman. Now that I think about it,
he auditions for the Wolfman, and they're like, "Say moon," and he's like, "Moon, honeymoon."
Remember that? Remember when I said that, guys?
What is he trying to play Dracula? Remember when I said that to you guys?
Yeah, I don't know. That's just me trying to do my Benicio del Toro.
Remember the 5th of November.
Blah.
Fuck V for Vendetta.
Well, okay.
So okay, to continue, so the whole Rose and
Finn.
Finn. I can't believe I always
You
have
remembered Rose's name, but not Finn.
Yeah, I don't know why Finn. I'm not good at remembering his name.
All right, so
So Rose and Finn. The single dumbest scene in all of Star Wars, I would argue, even more so than the prequels, is the scene in which Rose rams him out of the way of certain death, but certain death that would have saved the day.
well, first of all, again,
we don't know
the key word for Last Jedi is subversive, and in the moment when you see Finn charging at this thing, you're like, oh, he's going to sacrifice himself and save the day. And really, Finn hasn't contributed much to the plot the whole film. So, like, this would have been his moment. And
what they did with Rose,
if she's in love with him, and the thing that she says after this is it's stupid as shit. But if she was actually in love with him, she would probably do that.
Even though that probably would have killed them both in all. I would say 9 out of 10 times what she did would have killed both of them rather than just saving.
What if they both died?
That would have been amazing.
And then the laser is still there.
Yeah.
If she did that not only would have been subversive, that would have been badass of a choice for
Star Wars: The Last Jedi, a film about making mistakes.
That's actually what the movie kind of is about. It's about
you're right, but not those kind of mistakes.
It's about failure after failure on the behalf of the resistance. Every plan they come up with kind of backfires on them in some way, and they have to come up with a quick plan to get out of it.
Bill, I have a sudden fan theory just came to mind. Maybe this film is just payback for all the years and years of talk about how stormtroopers are just bad at their jobs and terrible shots. Maybe it's this film is payback in that it's time for the rebels. They
need to get their asses handed to them. Yeah.
Well, not only handed to them, but in a bad way. Because in the Battle of Hoth and Empire Strikes Back, that was technically a failure, but it was a failure where they managed a successful escape. And
they were putting up a good fight too.
Yeah, they made themselves look good doing it. Versus this film is payback for all those jokes about stormtroopers who can't hit anything worth shit.
That's possible, but I don't know if that's like a vindictive thing. I don't think Rian Johnson was like going into this. Okay, guys, at Lucasfilm. Okay, Miss Kennedy, I got this great idea. See. And then he explains to them how he thinks stormtroopers ought to have their day. And then they're like, great, so we're going to sign you up for a new trilogy.
Can I ask how any of the main characters are any different at the end of this film than they were at the end of the last Force Awakens?
Well, for starters, Finn is awake. That's like a duh thing. I'm sorry, I was just trying to be funny. But
all right.
Rey has the biggest character arc, and I guess Luke has a character arc.
Rey's character arc goes from, at the end of Force Awakens, she's determined to save the Resistance by contacting Luke. At the end of this film,
and possibly learning something about herself.
Yeah, and learning something about herself. In this film, she's learned
the stuff. Okay, well, the stuff with her and Kylo Ren is very interesting, and it's very you didn't have that in the original trilogy. You didn't have a good guy kind of interacting with a bad guy through this psychic shit.
I would argue Luke and Darth Vader kind of had a weird connection.
Empire Strikes Back, Darth Vader is psychically calling to Luke, and Luke can hear it. So,
but he's
so it's a little similar.
Yeah, I guess it is okay.
The whole astral projecting thing,
That's new.
Luke making himself appear like flawlessly appear, projecting himself on another planet, and then he just decides to die.
Or maybe that cost him all of his energy. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I don't buy that it cost him energy because he seemed like he was doing okay for a few seconds after he was done there. If it cost him all his energy, what should have happened is as soon as he came back, he should have just been writhing and like breathing hard or something like that, and that doesn't happen.
He did kind of grab his belly, which I immediately thought, oh, when Kylo hit him with the lightsaber, maybe that affected him, his real body, kind of like in the Matrix. It's the Wachowski brothers.
I do not support that theory. No offense, Bill.
I know. I was fucking around.
The lightsaber affected him, but all of those thousands of blasters didn't.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm getting at.
Here's the thing: and the only thing, to me, the only reason the astral projection thing was put in the film is because they needed an excuse for Luke to survive all of those blasts. Which doesn't make any sense, because if he was killed at that point, then he would have served the same purpose that he did astral projecting.
There's I don't know. See, like this is good for discussion, because I think what they were trying to do on a grander scale was a lot more important than what was the theories that were coming up with that literally happened. Based on what was literally happening. Like,
question: what is the advantage of those speeders that drag their tail through the sand?
Well, that's to provide visual color and imagery and stuff.
I know
within the context of that galaxy. I know within the context of that, they even established that when the soldier dips his hand in the dirt and he's like, "Oh, it's salt."
Yeah,
they kind of established that the ground is covered in salt.
But those ships and their mechanism of dragging, the drag that creates is nothing but a hindrance, and in fact, it makes them a better target, because you can see that stream of red for a mile away.
Yeah, but I don't know if they could help that. I mean, I think that's just the environment. But
you could have a speeder that's able to hover.
Okay, but you see, when they were,
in fact, there are speeders.
Hang on a second. I know, Ken, I know. Jesus, I know. Please let me finish.
Can I finish? Please, can I finish?
Can I finish? Okay, I'm finished. What I was going to say was there's a moment when Finn, he's just hovering with his speeder, and then I think Rose says, like, hit this button or whatever, and then that thing comes down that drags against the dirt, and it stabilizes him. So I think those speeders, again, represent the fact that the Resistance has little to nothing to work with. And they're impractical, but they're going to try to use them anyways. This was an abandoned base that has been left to ruin for a long time now. And they have to use what they have to use. And that was what was available to them. And were these speeders that are easily detectable and are mostly crappy. Even Poe is like, we got to use these pieces of junk. He says some line like that. And he's like, all right, we got to make it work,
I have to say, probably my favorite thing about this movie is that Disney realized that Snoke was an awful idea, and so they just got rid of him.
Yeah. Yes, that was the. I think what they were thinking was, okay, we can't bring Sith back because the Sith are essentially dead, but we can have some vague guy who sort of is powerful with the Force, or is very powerful with the Force, actually. But he's not technically a Sith or a Jedi. He's just some guy who's really strong with it, and he's evil. And he could be the guy that is over Kylo Ren, that he influences him. And then in this movie, they're like, okay, now we can kill him. He's
I agree. Idiot, so. I agree with the Snoke theory. You're right. It was just like, we set this up, but screw it. We got cold feet.
Yeah, it was a good move, though. It was a good move to kill him.
Here's the thought that I had from The Force Awakens. If you notice, I mean, if you notice that Kylo Ren's lightsaber has this weird thing where it's not like a normal lightsaber. And I'm not just talking about the fact that it has the two things poking out the side. Yeah, it doesn't.
No, it's crackling. It's like it's on fire or something.
It's an imperfect thing, and so what I always thought was that whoever Snoke was a wannabe Sith Lord who knew a little bit about the Force, but wasn't a true master of the Sith, and that he taught Kylo Ren what he could about building a lightsaber, for instance. And so the lightsaber was an imperfect one that was, kind of on the fringe, on the verge of exploding at any time.
I kind of just thought that was a part of Kylo's thing. I thought he built that out of what he knew of building a lightsaber, and it was representative of his character. How he's very wild and fly off the handle, right? Yeah, that kind of thing.
The thing is, to me, Snoke as a master of the Sith probably wasn't very good at his job, and I think he was proved in this film that he's.
Yeah, he wasn't. He was very hubris. He had a lot of hubris. He wasn't very smart when it came to figuring. Like he claimed he was smart. He was like, "Oh yeah, I set up the communication between you two. I did this, I did that," and he couldn't tell that Kylo was about to kill him with a lightsaber.
The thing about the Sith is, like, they have thousands of years of history of backstabbing, and the fact that Snoke didn't think for a moment that the person he was badgering, who was
could potentially kill him. Yeah, right.
I mean.
I know that goes into the whole logic and everything. And well, when did you guys learn from this over time? Especially since the stories of the past movies are now in legend. In these like people know of the legend now. For the most part, there might be some differences in facts here and there. Like one person may know more than another, but for the most part, people know of Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and what they did.
The prequels being canon is very problematic because you talk about, like, in episode 3, Luke and Leia are born, but then it's like 25 maybe later, it's like Darth Vader, your ancient religion. Just 3 years ago.
Well, it was an ancient religion. Even in the prequels, it was still technically ancient. He didn't mean like he didn't mean Jedi was. Yeah, I know. He didn't mean ancient in the sense that it's been gone for a long time. He meant ancient in that it was around for a long time.
Is that ever clarified? Because I think
he meant it as an insult, like your ancient religion.
And then he gets choked. So old why would he know that he would get choked?
He didn't know he would get choked. Questions. Yeah, he didn't know that. He probably knew that was a possibility. Yeah, he should have known, definitely.
Was his baby's first Death Star working day?
All right, again, you guys, Ken and Bill, I have to What I'm
getting at, though, is just that I go into these movies, I don't expect them to be flawless ever.
No, I don't expect the Star Wars movies to be flawless. And Force Awakens was not flawless, but it was entertaining, and it maintained a consistent feeling of Star Wars awe and even Rogue One to an extent, I think maintained a good amount of it comparatively. This film, on the other hand, so much of it felt so calculated and so. This is the first time I've seen a Star Wars movie where it felt like and this includes the prequels, by the way. This is the first time I've seen a Star Wars movie where I felt that the first consideration that was given was to merchandising. Even the prequels, the first consideration that was being given was not necessarily to merchandising. It felt like it was, Lucas had the story he wanted to tell. He sure didn't know how to tell it, but he wanted to tell it.
See, I think I completely 100% disagree with this. I think this is actually, as a matter of fact, I think this is actually one of the first Star Wars movies to not care about merchandising. Even though, yes, the Porg.
And the Porgs were a successful merchandising
exercise. I get that, but of course that was going to happen.
But here's the thing, is that I did read an article that said that the Porgs were just them having to cover up these birds where they were shooting.
Yeah, that honestly, the Porgs aren't even my complaint, because I get that about the bird thing. That makes total sense.
Right.
And if it has the benefit of making a furry toy that you can give.
And Chewbacca's vegetarian now. It's
He's not vegetarian now. He just felt guilty about eating in front of another Porg.
At the end of the movie, though, the theory is that Chewbacca learned to not eat at least them. I don't know. Whatever.
He's not going to eat.
I've been reading too many internet articles.
So, Bill, here's my theory: is Chewbacca brought all of those Porgs on board in order to have livestock.
Oh my god!
he's gonna circulate them. He's gonna start breeding the Porgs and selling them as cattle.
My theory is that in the next Star Wars film, when you see the Millennium Falcon, there will be a few less Porgs, is what I'm saying.
And he's going to be rich as fucking hell because he's just sold them to different.
I don't remember who wrote it, but somebody wrote in an article Chewbacca's story arc is that he learns to love the Porg and goes vegan or something.
He doesn't have to have a fucking story arc. He's just Chewbacca in this movie.
I agree.
Who fucking cares? That's okay.
I don't remember what article I read.
People don't have to think that much into this kind of stuff, into those details. I mean, those details are that's fun to talk about and everything, but it's that's not what this movie's about.
What we can all agree on is that there's plenty of room for the Porg right next to the mashed potato.
Yes, exactly. And I'm sure they taste wonderfully, like quail or something.
Next to the Furbies and the BB-8 Radio Shack remote control thing that nobody plays with anymore.
Oh, the Sphero?
I actually wanted one of those. That seems like it'd be fun to have.
They have an R2-D2 version of it now.
Oh, of course they do. Okay.
Yeah, and probably the evil version of the robot.
Have we talked about Laura Dern?
Yeah, we have not talked about Laura Dern.
We briefly touched on something she does, but we didn't actually talk about her now.
So, first of all, I'm going to say that Laura Dern's character was entirely pointless in this film.
Just like her character in
I love Laura Dern as an actress.
You're totally full of it here.
All they had to do to make... Here's the thing, and Princess Leia also has very little to do in this movie. What they should have done is just made...
We'll talk about Leia, because
First of all,
Laura Dern.
Laura Dern and Leia should have been... Leia and whatever her character was should have been the same character.
Holdo.
What does Red Letter Media say about Obi-Wan? He's like, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan should have been combined into one character called Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah, it's the exact same problem here, because there is the only thing that Laura Dern's character in this film accomplishes is doing what Leia would have done in the film if it wasn't for the fact that some screenwriter wrote her being unconscious. And all of this, the contention with...
Well, actually, she wasn't unconscious at the time that Laura Dern's character, Holdo, made her move. They had already moved into the other ships at that point, and Leia was awake at that point.
So, also, I know that they made this promise a year ago that they're not going to kill Princess Leia off because, out of respect for Carrie Fisher. But I'm sorry, respect and all for her as an actress and a person. It's a wonderful thing. There was no reason for not killing her character off in this movie.
Yeah, that was one thing I kind of agree with. I was actually expecting and prepared for that. I kind of thought that would happen, and then
instead
one scene
flying through space.
Shut up!
God,
that was okay.
That was also one of the worst things I've ever seen in a Star Wars film.
I don't know if I would go that far, but if that was supposed to be her using the Force, that's dumb to me.
No, that's what it was supposed to be, her using the Force.
How is it dumb? It's using she barely survived that. But the Force.
When did she ever teach? When did she ever get taught how to do this? Like, think about Rey's training.
Know.
Think about Rey's training in this and Luke's training in Empire. Like, it took them a long time to learn how to lift some rocks, and now she can just do that out of nowhere.
I'll be honest.
I think you guys.
It's not the use of the Force that bothers me. It's the way that scene was shot. The way she's like holding her arm out, and it's like her body is stiff as a freaking board, and it's just the most awkward framing of the shot. The way she's flying around, they could have come up with something that didn't look so dumb.
Okay, well, I disagree. I disagree with that aspect too. But
the audience that I was in at that theater, at least half of us were laughing out loud at the absurdity
in my screening, and I'm not gonna say it was like an outright bad idea. It just wasn't a well set up idea. If maybe in The Force Awakens they had set up that like Leia had been learning, like tapping into the Force, maybe this would have.
In Empire Strikes Back, they set it up.
When is this moment?
She could hear Luke's cries for help when after he fell in that hole that led him on the bottom of the sky of Cloud City, and he's hanging there, and he's like, Leia, and she's like, we have to go back. You know, they set it up right there that she has.
Okay, and I know the extended universe sets that up as well, but the extended universe is no longer canon.
Right, I'm talking about things that have actually happened in the.
They do establish that she has at least a psychic bond with other people who are Force users, but what I will say is that makes
her more of a medium, and
I mean it's not the fact that she uses the Force that bothers me. It's the way that entire sequence was blocked, and the way it was.
Yeah, it's a very self-indulgent shot, and it just looks very silly. And I didn't laugh at it in context, but thinking back on it, if I see it again, I might snicker. I don't know. It is
one of the more unintentional funny moments.
I feel like with a lot of the issues you guys are bringing up, I'm like right in the middle.
You say you guys, it's mostly Ken. I'm the one trying to bring some balance here, but there's like no room to budge. It's just utter, utter negative talk.
And now I'm being negative right now because I was told to say what problems I had with this movie.
Yeah, no, that's totally okay. I'm just trying to articulate my
thing.
I'm totally fine with you saying this stuff. I'm just saying I haven't really been given much room to talk. You know.
Oh, all right. You're.
Well, I'm gonna give you the floor. Tell me what you loved about this movie.
Okay. All right. Well, for starters, let me go to my Letterboxd review. And I'm actually preparing a further review for a blog, but I think my issue with y'all's issues, if you will me to say the word y'all. Yeah, exactly. Sorry, people. I'm from Louisiana.
I'm from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, right. My issue with y'all's issues is that they seem to be very superficial. You know, like Ken, you brought up a couple good points here and there about like the technical flaws. You know, like the shot wasn't framed right, or if it was framed right, it was done pretentiously.
I disagree with that. There were a lot of shots in this that I loved. Not to cut you off, Bill, but I think you can build on like the Red Room in Snoke and that fight that happens in there. That was shot really well, and that was really exciting.
I was mentioning one specific shot that Ken brought up.
What's this shot?
The Leia shot when she's
floating in
space, frozen.
I will admit
I wasn't talking about the entire movie. In fact, I even disagree with that point about that shot being bad. But
I've heard people talk bad about it. Yeah.
Well, okay, fine, but
I guess I'm the incorrect one.
No, you're not. You're not the incorrect one or anything. I'm just trying to get my 2 cents in, and every single time I try to throw them into the pond.
Let's talk about the Leia shot. I'm sorry,
some little rat bastard grabs them and goes to buy some ice cream or some shit. You know?
All right, Bill. Please tell me when you're getting into this, what was the good reason to keep Leia alive after this movie?
Well, okay, I don't know where the director or I don't know where Rian Johnson's head was at in terms of thinking for episode 9. I don't know what their plans were before Carrie Fisher's death. I'm sure she factored in very importantly to whatever they're planning on doing with episode 9, and now they're having to race to change those plans with J.J. Abrams and everyone else. So I can't speculate, but I will say though that I didn't have an issue with them keeping her alive in this movie. I know they're going to have to explain it away somehow, maybe in the title crawl, maybe some other way in the next movie. But even though that was the perfect moment to get rid of her character, was when Kylo Ren was prepared to shoot her, and then he didn't, and then other TIE fighters came in and seemingly killed everyone in the cockpit area. That I was prepared for that. I thought, okay, this is the end of Leia. That's how they're going to do it. And then surprisingly, she's back, and I just didn't have an issue with that. I just didn't. I was going with the flow. I kind of thought that was an effort to build up Holdo, and then to continue on with Poe Dameron being very much a Leia fanboy. He's like, no, Leia's my leader. You're not my leader.
That would have actually, honestly, considering the circumstances of Carrie Fisher passing away unexpectedly, that would have been an interesting avenue for them to take to keep Laura Dern in this series.
Yeah, and I was kind of sad when I saw her character just sacrifice herself like that. Even though that was a good scene, I was looking forward to more from her character, in the next movie. So that if there is maybe one fault, it might be they pulled the trigger a little too quickly on Holdo.
That again, they missed a second opportunity there to kill off Leia in a poignant way.
Okay, fine, but these are things that we can't help as fans. We can't petition them to.
Well, I know we can't
the movie.
help it as fans, but
we can point it out. Yes,
they have all sorts of technology. They could have added.
I will say this: if it comes around in 2 years to episode 9, and it's like she dies off screen in the opening crawl, that will feel like a super wasted opportunity to at least have done it right with this film, considering it released posthumously.
And in fact, I will say this, and Bill, you can take this to the bank. If when the next Star Wars movie comes out, they come up with a legitimate way to explain the fact that she's not in the films anymore, something that's believable, understandable, that doesn't feel awkward or like postscript writing, then everything I'm saying right now, I will take back.
Okay. I mean, I don't have an issue with you guys saying this stuff. But my only issue was
a damn good reason.
I think we can agree. I think we can agree. This puts everyone, the filmmakers, the producers, everyone, in a very tight and tough spot.
Yes.
The shot where everything gets silent and it's black and white, where she cuts through the starship or whatever.
Yeah,
that was really cool, and I like that. And apparently theaters are having to warn audiences that
it's not there were only 2 AMCs that did that.
Oh, okay. That's still weird,
but it's still weird that any AMC would have to put up a sign like that. Because you would think that, especially in The Last Jedi, I think you guys would agree with me on this, that it's so stylistically different from any other of the main Star Wars movies.
Are you quoting the prequels?
Yeah.
No, I'm not doing that. It's so dense. It's so dense. Every image has so many things going on in it. No, I'm not doing that. And let's stop bringing up Red Letter Mia for a fucking second. What I'm getting at is, you think the audience by that point in the movie where the Star Destroyer gets split in half by the other ship through Holdo's sacrifice, you would think they would have been prepared for some kind of change in the cinematic language, that things would get quiet and that would be a part of the film. They would be like, oh, right. This is meant to be silent. This isn't supposed to be a technical gaffe or something. So I was done with that part.
So,
Yes.
what did I enjoy about this film?
What did you enjoy
Yeah,
about this
yeah,
film?
I'd like to hear this.
Okay, I'll start with a few things.
Okay.
So, the first thing I can say I legitimately enjoyed on the island with Luke. I liked the way that they twisted around where Luke was trying to run away from the Force. That he believed that from everything he'd seen, everything he'd learned, that knowledge of the Force was not in the best interests, regardless of its light side or dark side. So his resistance to Rey and that conflict that it creates, I thought made for some very interesting moments. I liked the weird giraffe lizard creature milk scene. That was
We know where
bizarre
blue
and
milk
weird.
comes from now. Hooray!
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, I don't know if that's actually where blue
I,
milk comes from, but I
I
mean,
think isn't that what that was supposed to be? That was
no,
like a little.
this was green.
Oh, it looked.
It was slurm.
Oh,
Yeah, like literally slurm. You know, it was coming from a creature. What I liked about that moment was Luke drinking a swig of that stuff out of his water bottle. They even Star Warsed up the water bottle, which I thought was pretty funny. And he makes a grimace on his face, like this is hard alcohol. You know, he's like, you know, like I'm gritting my teeth now.
I like hard old cynical Luke. Like that was one of my favorite things about this movie, and especially having Mark Hamill in that role. And I know he's spoken out against it, but Obi-Wan became a hermit. Yoda became a hermit. It makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Although you could argue those characters didn't really become fully cynical. Luke became like completely, you know, like, look, I'll protect the texts of the Jedi, but don't ask me to train anyone.
Right. I didn't look into it that much for me because again I don't look at these movies as like these biblical texts. I just fun movies, and I get to see Mark Hamill act, and now I guess maybe he'll pop up as a Force ghost in the future. That'll be fun. Seeing Yoda as a puppet in this was a lot of fun for me. Frank Oz voiced him.
That was very cool. That was unexpected. I was not prepared for that.
Yeah.
I thought that was not going to happen, and then it did, and I was like, oh. What I loved about that too was the fact that Yoda made the move. You know, Yoda was like, "Oh, you're gonna burn down the Jedi text." Yawn.
Well,
and then he takes care of it himself.
I have to say, while it was a little bit corny, I gotta say I love the line "page turners." They were not.
Yeah. But I will say, unfortunately, to bring up Red Letter Media once again, in their not Force Awakens, in their Last Jedi review, they bring up that Yoda's acting more like Yoda, whatever their point was about how he was before Luke found out that he was Yoda.
See, I don't. The whole thing of him being goofy and such prior, I always just assumed that was that was Yoda's personality when he wasn't working. You know,
that was more of a diversion. That was more of like a way to disarm Luke.
See, I don't agree with that. I think that, well, I mean, okay, I do agree that that's what he was doing, but
that's also part of his personality.
Frank Oz has been doing Muppets for the past 30 years, so.
And so what I always assumed was that when Yoda was doing the teaching, that he was, all, playing the role of the teacher. But when amongst colleagues that he didn't have to necessarily be teaching all the time, I could imagine him in the break room of the Jedi laundromat
around the coffee, or maybe at the corporate retreats. They're he's getting down and dirty and like drinking a lot and all that. Yeah.
Please
he's the fun drunk.
Yoda was totally the guy who steals your shit out of the fridge at the break room. He did it to Luke right in front of Luke's face.
He did it to Art, and R2 tried getting it back. He's like, "No, mine."
He stole his little sausage.
Starts hitting him with the cane.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is, I always thought that was part of his personality, his goofiness.
Okay.
I can. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, see, again, I'm taking the prequels as canon, and he wasn't so much of that in the prequels, but I don't like the prequels, so you know.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
prequels can be thrown away for all I care.
Well, Han Solo movie might have some prequel references in it. We'll see.
The
Well, even the Force
Solo
Awakens,
film?
had a prequel reference when Kylo Ren was like talking to Hux, and he said maybe we should have used clone troopers instead.
Oh, I don't remember that line, but
Yeah, he said that. Yeah, and Hux was like, "Fuck you, my plan works better."
oh, that's a fan line. Like,
Yeah.
no, they're
Yeah.
never coming back.
The only thing that could have made it even more fan servicey is if instead they said, oh, "What do you mean clones? We never used clones."
George who?
Oh man, even better would be if in the Force Awakens, like the first 5 minutes of the film is like the stormtroopers tracking down and murdering a person who just kind of talks like this a little bit.
Rich Evans. It's just them killing Rich Evans.
No, it's like
Listen, this new Death Star, it's stylistically different from any Death Star we've had before.
No, this is how the Force Awakens should have opened.
They killed Dexter Jetster.
Right, no, right as the credits are rolling, right as the opening crawl.
Title crawl?
Yeah, title crawl ends. The camera descends onto the planet, and you see this guy, this probably 60, 70-year-old dude running desperately through the desert. He's got a flannel shirt and a beard, and stormtroopers are chasing him down, and he falls down. The stormtroopers run around him, and he's like, "Guys, seriously, I didn't mean to write all those bad things about you." Ah! And then they blow him away.
Okay, so
that kind of reminds me of Aqua Teen Hunger Force : movie film for theaters, where that workout machine that was like taking over the city.
Insanoflex.
The Insanoflex, yes. They were watching an Insanoflex video of a fat guy on an island running away from the Insanoflex before he gets shot in the head and it explodes. That kind of your description of George Lucas running away from stormtroopers kind of reminded me of that.
Yes.
So let's wrap this shit up. Give your opinions on The Force Awakens in a minute or less.
Or The Last Jedi.
Oh, shit. I keep calling it The Force Awakens.
It shows how memorable this movie is.
Oh,
I remember the movie. I liked the movie more than you did. I just, I
liked it more than both of y'all combined.
I call all of them Star Wars. So I'm that guy.
Okay, Star Wars.
So,
we'll start with Ken.
Star Wars: Last Jedi is a stumbling point for me. It has some individual scenes I enjoyed, but it did not create a greater whole. I would like to rewatch it just to see if maybe I'm missing something, because at this point I feel like it just didn't feel right to me. All right.
Okay, I'll go. A Shining. I'm going to read from my a couple of passes from my review on Letterboxd. A shining cinematic beacon of engaging and vivid visuals, of fun colors, and of the classic battle between good and evil, affirmed and imagined in exciting ways. The best Star Wars film yet? Unclear until it too falls into legend. And at that point, let it pass the torch on to something else. Nothing is too sacred, not even the Skywalker saga.
Yeah, I agree with what Bill said for the most part. I think I thought it had a few flaws. Some of the attempts at comedy were a little much, and I think that honestly Finn should have died because it would have given a little more weight to the stakes and feeling like, oh, people can die in this, important people, aside from Han Solo. New characters might be able to die in this, but overall, I I had a blast. I had a lot of fun watching this. And probably for like most of the same reasons, you know.
Ken?
All right.
I have nothing more to say.
Take a second. Like we had to kind of wait there for like the delay.
Okay, you know what? I do have this to say.
Okay.
I'm interested to see where they go with the new characters. I will add that.
So, moving on.
What were you going to say, Ken?
Nothing.
Oh, you were just going to say, I have this to say. Moving on. That's what you were going to do?
Yeah, well, you know, I had something to say, and
well, go ahead if you want to say. Yeah, you know.
Okay.
What was that?
That's what I had to say.
The bird is the word, essentially. Okay.
Wrong song, but yeah, same. You know.
I know, it's the wrong song. I know.
I'm just having fun with the facts that I can actually play sounds through my headphones with this thing. So
yeah, I think that's going to come really in handy. I sound so enthusiastic about it.
All right, tell us about Tragedy Girls, Bill.
Okay. Tragedy Girls. I had to reach out to the distributor to get a hold of this movie because it's playing in a very limited release right now. I think it might be finished with its release actually, and it's probably heading to VOD like come January. This is a film featuring two teenage girls who have previously played X-Men. The girl who played Storm in X-Men Apocalypse and the girl that played Negasonic Teenage Warhead in Deadpool. It stars the two of them, and they are social media darlings in the film, or wannabe darlings, rather. They have a Twitter and a Tumblr and an Instagram and all that called Tragedy Girls, and it's like they're reporting the news, you know, kind of thing. And the news they're reporting on is this theory that they have that there's a serial killer on the loose in their small town. This isn't really a spoiler that I'm going to say this, because at the beginning of the film, it's pretty much revealed. They are, in fact, copycatting the serial killer. They have captured the serial killer and are keeping him alive through torture and stuff like that. They're just, you know, messing with him while they're going out and killing other people to get more followers. This is also their senior year in high school. So it's this weird, darkly comic concoction of glitz and gore, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean? Like it's pink, it's glittery, it's all that stuff, but it's also red, deep red with blood.
Does it have little spring breakers in it?
It depends on how you mean.
Well, you know, Spring Breakers was a very, it was shot like an MTV Generation kind of film would be.
No, this isn't shot like that. No, but there are some, you know how sometimes in these movies where they deal with social media, they'll do a little pop-up where it shows a chat window that's next to the person. Mm-hmm. They do shit like that in this movie, which isn't very inventive. Because it's been done several times before, but it's like, how else are you going to express that?
Right.
So they do that. But I would say what this movie has above everything else is style and spunk, specifically in the mood and in the performance, the two main performances. When I speak of the mood, I mean more like how it's very much satirical and afraid of this generation of high schoolers. You know, this generation of kids coming up who are going to be the future leaders of America, essentially. And how it's kind of making fun of them while also being scared of them at the same time. You know, seriously, this movie is very much afraid of these two girls, you know, that they're covering, but they're also making fun of the people around them.
So this
Like,
is
there's this one.
this is the modern day equivalent of that episode of the TV show Dragnet, in which they find like a hippie who cooked a baby alive, right?
Was that an actual episode?
Yes.
Jesus. I
Yeah.
didn't think they went that dark.
In the 1969 retread of Dragnet, it was basically pure like anti counterculture propaganda, and there's a whole bunch of anti-drug statements that are completely misinformed and hilariously so.
I didn't know that was I thought that was just a Simpsons reference. Or something, you know, but now I get it. That's actually, you know, no. There's this one scene in the movie that sticks out to me as being a perfect example of the comedy in the movie, or the satirical nature of the movie. The two girls, the tragedy girls, so to speak, they go up to Josh Hutcherson, who has a motorcycle, and one of them finds him very attractive and is just swooning over him. The other's just rolling her eyes like, yeah, whatever, you know. And they're talking to him about possibly collaborating, or allowing him to share some of their information, or give them a shout out online. And he starts talking in these with these very heavy sentiments regarding his social media and this importance of his Twitter account, and my followers don't think that I should just be getting shout outs so easily. You see, all 15,000 of the people that follow me all expect, you know, he's talking about like it's really fucking important, you know, and I'm sitting there just laughing my ass off. Like, these people are just deluding themselves if they think this online life is worth shit, you know. And I mean, apparently it is, if people think it is, but in the grand scheme of things, what's really more important is the face-to-face shit. But you know, how this scene plays out is the actress that plays Storm in X-Men Apocalypse, she's the one that's having these attractive feelings towards Josh Hutcherson, and she's just like slowly but surely is going out of focus, hearing in her mind romantic music playing, and so she's just smiling as he's talking about my Twitter followers and everyone that reads my stuff on Tumblr. Yeah, you can check it out at www.whogivesAfuck.com, you know, or whatever his website is. And that's just me paraphrasing. And it's the funniest fucking scene in the movie, I think. The rest of the movie is basically the two girls getting away with horrific murder after horrific murder. I mean, they're cutting up body parts. They're stuffing body parts into other body parts. They're laughing about it. They're taking pictures and selfies. They're having a friend edit videos for them so they can put it up on Snapchat and Instagram and stuff. They're flying in the face of the local police, and the sheriff is all pissed off about it, you know. And the whole time they're just craving attention. You know, the whole time they're like, why aren't we more popular? Oh, you know, let's go kill someone tonight. Okay. You know, and they go do that, you know.
God damn.
And it's actually kind of,
did Harmony Korine make this film?
I was going to say, when I said Spring Breakers earlier, nothing you've said has convinced me that this isn't a Harmony Korine film.
No, this is not a Harmony Korine film. This is a Tyler McIntyre film. Tyler McIntyre, let me look up his... I got him up on Letterboxd right now. His previous film was a movie called Patchwork, which the synopsis reads, a delightfully dark Frankenstein-themed horror comedy about a reanimated corpse made from the stitched-together body parts of three murdered young women that decides to go on a bloody quest to find their killer and avenge their deaths.
What? Okay.
Yeah. So he's in the horror genre and also is kind of a weird freak. So he makes Tragedy Girls, and you know, it's this weird macabre mishmash of absurd humor, absurd horror, and genuine ghouls. Like there's some moments in this movie that are really ghastly. I don't mean just the gore. I mean also the implications. Like about these kids that the director is making, and also the not necessarily the state of social media, or I think the social commentary stuff is a little. It's either too much or not enough. There's not really a balance there. I think what really helps this movie is the spunk of the two main actresses, and I think they're able to bring out dimensions within the story and within their characters that probably wouldn't have come to light if they had gotten two other actresses to do this. But they casted it just right, and they handle it really well. Sometimes too well, almost in a scary way. This is kind of a teenage, modern day natural born killers. It's closer to natural born killers than it is Spring Breakers. It's a little regressive at times in terms of like racial politics and teenage friendships and how it portrays high school and stuff. And it's a little too reliant on F-bombs and also a fuck you attitude. Like this movie is very much like a middle finger at times.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know to what though. That's part of the problem. Is it's kind of a middle finger to everyone.
That's how I felt about Downsizing.
Yeah, but there's a boldness and a cleverness that hits in just the right spots.
That's not how I felt about Downsizing.
Okay, all right. So I ultimately gave this movie 3 out of 5 stars. I thought it was, just entertaining enough and had some good spots in it. It's, as far as I know, it's not on VOD right now, but I know it, like I said earlier, it's wrapping up its theatrical run. So it should be on its way very soon.
Cool. It sounds intriguing. I have to say, the transgressive nature of it is intriguing.
Yeah, it's very. I would say, without a doubt, it is very transgressive.
So that I will certainly look up when it comes out. Okay, so next on our list to discuss is Downsizing, which, Bill, you just saw Downsizing, and I saw it about a couple 2 days ago. So I'm going to let you.
Sorry,
I'm going to let you start, Bill. What did you think of Downsizing?
What I thought about it, that's it. Like I saw the trailer and I was like, this could be interesting, I guess, but at the same time, it was like this is also kind of bland.
Yeah,
and I don't understand what it's trying to say.
So I don't understand what it's trying to say either, and I think the reason is because Alexander Payne didn't know what he was trying to say. He was,
which is odd for Alexander Payne, right?
Well,
I mean, is it odd for him? I mean, I don't know. I got Election and Sideways. I got what he was intending for those movies.
So here's
was Sideways based on something?
I think it was an original story, wasn't it?
Sideways is a true story of the two most objectionable men you've ever met going on an annoying binge, drinking wine and hating on their girlfriends.
Right.
And
so it's an adaptation. Okay.
Yeah, it's so it's I'm honestly not that big of a fan of Sideways.
Oh. I think it's effortlessly hilarious, but
I like Sideways a lot myself.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I like about it, is that those characters are despicable and unlikable rather.
Well, it's not that a film has to absolutely have nothing but likable characters in them. But if you're going to be spending an entire film with characters, you have to at least find a reason to be entertained watching them. And that was what I was not during Sideways.
This is not the place for that discussion. So Downsizing is not like Sideways.
Well, it's not like Sideways in that there are some characters in it who are not like horrible people. But I would
say Matt Damon's character, despite being basic and kind of uninspired, Matt Damon has a charm as an actor to at least give a little bit of charisma to that role.
Give a little bit of my love to you.
The film does not play that song, and it does not play the "Once in a Lifetime" by Talking Heads, which was.
How did I get here?
Well, it's in the trailer, and when I started the movie, I started singing it. So I was hoping it was in there.
Yeah, it's not.
That's too bad.
So okay, so here's the thing. Downsizing. It tells.
Let's go into premise. Pitch me the premise of this film.
Okay, so. The film takes place. The opening scene takes place, I would say, in the not too distant future, somewhere in time.
Not too distant future.
There was a guy named Joel.
Yeah.
So anyway, no, it starts in Norway, and this Norwegian guy, the scientist, discovers this mechanism for shrinking. Creature by experimenting on a mouse, and he proposes it as a potential way to solve the global overpopulation crisis by making everyone smaller. Okay, cool. That's fast forward 10 years in the future, and it's become a pretty popular thing, but still, not everyone's switching to it, and mostly because very realistically, there's a ton of people who are fucking worried about the concept and think that it sounds creepy. And
well, I would say I think the majority of the world kind of rejects it, especially poor people.
They specifically say in the movie that something like only 2% of the planet has elected to do it at this point.
Yes.
Anyway, and Matt Damon plays this guy who he's an occupational therapist doing physical therapy for people who are going through rehabilitation, and he lives in his mother's home, and he lives there with his wife, played by Kristen Wiig, and it's not a spoiler to say that they decide they're going to go through the shrinking procedure in order to because they're going through some financial trouble and they can't really afford a good home that they want to move to. So they find out that by shrinking themselves, their relatively small equity they built on their house translates to like $12 million in the little people world.
Well, I do want to point out, you called him an occupational therapist. At this point in the story, he's working for Omaha Steaks.
Yes, as an occupational therapist, he specifically says it there.
Oh, I thought he was just like a warehouse manager. Okay, I missed that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Isn't that what he's doing at the start when his mother's sick?
So occupational therapy, just to give a quick
run me over like a steamroller.
Okay, well, I'm just going to explain it really quick. It's a form of physical therapy where a person, say someone's been injured on the job, you help them basically get back into the physical shape that they need to do their job properly. And you maybe show them, say someone injures their leg and they're starting to return to work. Your job is to help them walk better in such a way that there's less stress on their bad knee.
Now, in my defense, they do not focus on that so much. What they focus on is that he went to medical school and ended up at Omaha Steaks.
There is actually a line in the movie, Bill, where he explicitly lays out what he does for a living.
That's later on. I know what scene you're talking about, but
yeah. So
the film was boring, so my mind trailed off more than once.
I should say that this movie is like an hour and 15 minutes.
No, this movie's about 2 hours and 10 minutes without credits.
Yeah, what I was saying is it's about an hour and 15 minutes too long.
Yeah, no, he's not wrong. He's not wrong.
It's
even then though, like if it was that short, I still wouldn't be thrilled to watch it. It wouldn't be something that I would watch again. And that's kind of the root of the problem here is like, was Alexander Payne just like smoking pot with somebody and was like, it'd be a great idea.
this is a high concept science fiction story that relies on its. There's a lot of the thing about this kind of science fiction story is there's a lot of science fiction films that have this where the entire thing revolves around one central specific premise. You have, for instance, Looper, where the whole thing revolves around this very specific form of time travel that takes place.
Or that Paul Giamatti movie, Cold Souls.
Sure, and
I've never been able to finish Cold Souls for the same reason that I kind of find it.
Right, I think that's a good comparison, actually.
Yeah, they had this really great premise, and then I watch it, and it's like, this is boring.
You have that Justin Timberlake movie. Was it called?
The Time thing.
In time.
Let's get into the meat of the problem here, which is that they set up these premises that could give way to social commentary, and then they don't really follow through on the social commentary. Like, again, when we started this review, I had said, like, I don't know what this movie's trying to say.
Yeah, no, this movie doesn't know what it's saying. The movie.
So wait. I want to just put this in perspective for Bill. The whole shrinking yourself thing becomes popularized as sort of this fad for married people or upper class people. Like, it's sort of a midlife crisis fad that they do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that's kind of how, and like when Matt Damon goes, and obviously the trailer spoils that Kristen Wiig, who is his wife, gets cold feet and she doesn't have the procedure.
And then disappears from the film entirely.
Yes, after he signs this, that scene's in the trailer where he signs the divorce papers and he's like, "Print as large as you can, please." And he looks back like, he gives him that look like, Something
that I didn't get about this is because the divorce takes place approximately a year after the events of the of Kristen Wiig refusing to go through the procedure, is how Matt Damon went from mansion to shitty apartment and working a call center job.
That's called divorce, my friend. She took his money from him.
Except for the fact that he has $12 million potential dollars. She would have taken half of his estate. So he'd still have $6 million.
I don't know. You're right. You're right about that. But again,
it's not like they had any kids, so there's no child support payments. If she could make the argument, if it's one of those like old school marriages where she didn't even have a job of her own, maybe you could make the argument that she sued for more alimony, saying that she doesn't know how to do work or something. But
so
that's like
I'm sorry. Continue.
The one thing, like in the only way you could recover more than your half in terms of alimony is if you make an argument that you deserve more than that, and that the judge agrees with you. And
in his case, I would say yeah. Well, all right. So also, okay, the appeal of shrinking yourself in this film seems to be that you don't have to have a job. But we see in the miniaturization process, we see little people working for the, involved in that, and clearly, like, that's their job. And then we see Matt Damon get a job later.
You have to have people working at the, Marks and Spencer in Little People Land.
And they talk about. They have these jewelry stores and they have breweries and Christoph Waltz. Okay, so let's talk about Christoph Waltz because he's probably the best character in the entire film.
First of all, his name is not spelled this way, but his name is Dushin. It's D-U-S-A-N, but I guess they pronounce it in the movie Dushin. And you know what? It's fitting because his character is a total douche.
However, I mean, yes, he's a dick, but he's the smartest character in the movie because he's gotten into the illegal smuggling business.
Oh yeah, the thing is, what they tell you at the beginning of the film is, what they tell all the people is that you're going to come to Little People Land and suddenly everything's going to be better. But
I've been calling it Tiny Town as a reference to the terror of Tiny Town. Which
so here's the thing, though, you got to still have janitors in Tiny Town.
This is true. And cleaning ladies, as we find out, but we'll get to that. Let's keep it on Christoph Waltz.
So Christoph Waltz is the first very strong hint that something is wrong in Tiny Town, in that he holds these crazy parties. There's a lot of drugs.
They give Tiny Matt Damon tiny ecstasy in this film.
Yes, Tiny Matt Damon gets miniature tiny ecstasy pills, and goes off on a friggin' trip. That whole party sequence, by the way, is like a friggin' half-hour long.
Yeah, that should have been edited down. Yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, that was kind of pointless. So he wakes up the next morning and he chats with Christoph Waltz, and Waltz is very freely saying, that he runs a smuggle, illegal stuff brought into the.
For some context, Bill, Christoph Waltz's brother is still big, so like they're in cahoots with like smuggling illegal shit into these communities.
Okay.
Anyway, and at the same time that's happening, Matt Damon realizes that one of the maids cleaning his Christoph Waltz's party destroyed apartment is sort of a kind of a famous celebrity figure who who prior to the events of Matt Damon being there, basically she was one of the first people to have been forcibly miniaturized by her government.
She's a Vietnamese refugee.
Yes, and apparently the Vietnamese government forced her to be shrunk, and she escaped and made it to America.
Everyone else that she got here with was killed, and she is missing a leg. Her leg was amputated.
And so now she lives in America, and Matt Damon assumed because he saw her in the news that she was rich, but no, she's a maid working, cleaning up. And Matt Damon sort of is intrigued by this. He follows her around, and it turns out that just outside the confines of Tiny Town is Tiny Town's slum.
Oh.
That's kind of the big, outside of the Kristen Wiig getting cold feet, which they spoiled in the trailer, the other big twist in this film is, there are slums.
Well, there's another big twist that comes later. That
one was dumb, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. So anyway, the only real piece of social commentary in the film comes from this moment, which is the realization of the fact that in order for everyone in Tiny Town to live their happy lives, like upper middle class consumers, there has to be people there to do the grunt.
Maybe, and I'm just now realizing this, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe the unspoken idea behind the political commentary here is that the idea is we're going to create this society that isn't like the regular society, but maybe corporations got involved and it's just become the same exact thing as the big people world. And
that's what it is supposed to do, but it doesn't concentrate on that enough, and you don't get a lot of...
Oh, no, yeah, that is not the central theme of this,
This movie misses a lot of opportunities. It misses an opportunity to show the desperation of these the people living in this slum, their situation. I think it would have been interesting if, say, like an insect got into their little habitat and started fucking with their day. Not necessarily even killing people, but just, building a nest or something.
Yeah, there was never any attack of something larger than the small people.
They also didn't establish whether the shrunken people, how their strength is compared to like tall people, because the one thing that happens is when the small people want to travel around in big people world, they have these like bulletproof glass boxes that they're carried around in.
Well, let's talk about this. I
would have loved to have seen a scene where a guy trips and falls and the box shatters and you see these little people like chopped in half or something.
There's
rated R, so they could have gone there.
This movie's rated R because they use the word fuck repeatedly in the third act, and we'll get to that.
Plus, you see dicks.
You see what?
Some dicks.
Oh yeah, you do see some dicks, but
Quite a few.
yeah. there's like maybe 4 lines back and forth between Carrie Kinney and Matt Damon about, oh, I was at a big people restaurant and everybody was staring at me, and it's like they're trying to do this prejudice angle, but they never bring that back and they never expand on it. It's just this little throwaway line, and it's like that's what was frustrating about this is like I think this premise in the hands of somebody, I don't want to say more creative because I'm not familiar with Alexander Payne's work outside of Sideways, but somebody creative really could have done something with this.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
I just think that like they laid the seeds for this social commentary shit.
There's elements in this that were intriguing. There's enough in this film that kept my interest. Like as dull as it would be, something would happen, and I'd be like, "Oh, are they going to go with that?" And then
no, they don't.
They don't go along with that. They at one point you meet this person who's supposed to be like one of the the first tiny baby who's born, and now he's like a teenager.
Which, given the timeline, I don't know if that bothered you, but it was like the scientist. The opening scene is the scientist creating the miniaturization process, and then it's like 1 year later, and then it's like Matt Damon
10 years later.
10 years later, and I'm like, 11 years have passed. How is this baby an 18-year-old?
That's a good question. I
don't think the movie cared, which again, like it was frustrating because I don't think that this premise should have yielded such an uninteresting, unaffecting. It just feel like nobody cared really.
Adding insult to injury, and this is where we get into some spoiler territory. But I don't care because this movie doesn't have.
I've already given a few spoilers, but yeah.
So to add insult to injury is the last third of the film in which, for some reason, Matt Damon is asked to come with, Christoph Waltz to the original Little People colony in
well, the reason for that is so that he can have an excuse to not help the Vietnamese refugee.
Okay, yeah, which
because he has a conversation with Christoph Waltz where he's like, I got to get out of this,
and she invites herself along, so they go on this trip, and it turns out that the original colony is sort of like also a doomsday cult because they believe that
it's like Heaven's Gate.
Yeah, they believe that the end of the world is coming and fast, and they've built a bunker. And so they're going to live in this bunker, and once all humanity is dead, they'll come back and they will rebuild.
Oh, that was again, in the hands of somebody more creative and willing to go over the top with this material, that could have been very funny. That could have been a funny reveal. But in the context of this movie, it's just like
the only thing the only thing that this movie was missing was like fast forwarding to the future and going full Beneath the Planet of the Apes, where they're like worshiping a nuclear bomb.
That would have, but again, in the hands of somebody like I think, and I know Alexander Payne is like a comedy drama guy. Like, give this to a comedian. I just feel like this material was wasted because this could have worked, and this could have worked. You just came up with a really funny cutaway gag that they could have done, maybe in the post credits or something. How about
the fact that James Van Der Beek shows up randomly? Where the hell has he been?
He's been working in television, actually, if you didn't know.
Well, since I don't really watch television, no.
Right? Yeah, I mean he still acts. He still acts every once in a while, but I think it's mostly on television. But yes, I do remember seeing him and going, "Oh, that's James Van Der Beek." I thought the same thing, honestly.
And I have to say, besides Christoph Waltz, Udo Kier is his friend who's also sort of in the business. And Udo Kier is one of those actors. Seeing him play up against Christoph Waltz, you've got an Austrian and a German actor, and they're being, very German with each other. For those who don't know Udo Kier, he's in a lot of stuff. He was in Brawl in Cell Block 99. Recently, he was in Nymphomaniac, The Lords of Salem.
I'll say about Christoph Waltz in this film.
Mm-hmm.
His scenes are worth watching if you want to see Christoph Waltz play like a very subtle version of Quagmire.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm dead serious. I mean, it's great because like he has these orgies up in his apartment, like he's a total perv, and he's like Christoph Waltz again. Like I mentioned this in the Facebook chat as I was watching the film. I was like, he's been on screen 2 seconds, and he's already the best thing in this movie.
Absolutely. And well, I mean, that's just kind of the way with Christoph Waltz in general. He's usually the best part of him. I mean, last year in that horrible ass friggin' Tarzan movie, he managed to be entertaining. So moving on to the next film. I did not see Bright, but you guys did.
Well,
I saw about 40. I think 40 minutes of it, and I did not care enough to proceed.
So Bright is the latest film by
David Ayer,
the most hit or miss director in Hollywood, David Ayer. And I say that with a little bit of love because he's made a couple of movies that I legitimately enjoy. He's also made a few movies that I think are just god awful.
He also made Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
Which falls into one of those categories, yes.
Yeah. End of Watch and Fury are solid films. Sabotage is a terrible movie, but it's kind of entertainingly terrible. And it's got some of the craziest friggin' gore effects like that I've seen in like a action movie recently. But Harsh Times, Street Kings, Suicide Squad. Yeah. So tell me about Bright.
Okay.
Sell me on
Bright,
or don't.
Well, I don't know if I can sell you on it, but I mean, I'll do my best to sum it up a little bit. Excuse me. Bright is a script written by Max Landis, our favorite screenwriter.
Now, I will point out before we proceed that Max Landis, as far as I know, kind of disowns the script. He says that this isn't the script he wrote. I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding him, but I am still a fan of his creativity. But yeah, this film, continue with the premise.
Okay. Definitely, I would say David Ayer made it his own, for better or for worse. You know, he took whatever Max Landis came up with and on it.
It doesn't feel like a Max Landis product. It feels like a David Ayer product.
Yeah, I could see some Max Landis influence in it, but it's very few and far between. The movie is basically that cartoon show Ugly Americans. If you recall, that cartoon show was on Comedy Central, and it was about basically all these different mythological and supernatural type species and characters coexisting with regular humans since the beginning of time.
Before you continue, I want to point out that what separates Bright from Ugly Americans is that Ugly Americans made it interesting because they were social workers, not police officers.
Not police officers, right? Of course.
And that,
I was about to clarify that actually.
Right. Okay. Well, good. I'm on top of you. We're on the same page.
We're on the same page, yes. So
I mean, because that was you brought it up, Ugly Americans. Like I've actually talked to people like, oh, that was a bad show, and I'm like, actually, it wasn't that bad. It was kind of interesting because it tackled it from that perspective.
Yeah, from a different perspective. One would argue from the perspective of a character who's ultimately naive and a little pathetic, maybe that kind of stuff. But in this movie, in Bright, it takes place in modern day Los Angeles, which could very well be 90s Los Angeles, actually, because we see LAPD officers just brutally beating people up, before arrest and everything.
Oh, so Tuesday.
So it's essentially Tuesday. Yeah, right. But in this world, magical beings or beings who were used to be perceived as magical, maybe, have been existing alongside humanity for, since the beginning of time. And those include orcs, elves, dwarves, fairies, which are kind of seen like as rodents. wizards don't really exist, but they call people who can hold a magic wand brights. That's their nickname, the brights. They can wield the power of magic and stuff, but they're kind of considered to be a thing of legend in this movie, I guess, or few and far between, very rare, beings. This movie follows a character by the name of Ward. He's a police officer who was recently shot on the job by an orc, and his partner, who is also an orc, played by Joel Edgerton. He's all eyes are on Will Smith, who is playing Ward, and this orc played by Joel Edgerton, because this is the first orc to be on the LAPD. And that's considered a very important thing, because within the culture of this movie, orcs are seen as like a lower class, working class, and also there are heavy stereotypes levied against the orcs. They're seen as they're essentially like representative of how idiot racists might see African Americans or Latin Americans as.
Is this Zootopia?
No, Zootopia is a better movie.
Well, I mean, because she was the first bunny police officer, and they looked down on the.
Yeah. That in that sense, yes, but I would say this is a lot more racist.
Okay.
Like violently racist, actually. Will Smith is sort of prejudiced against this particular orc cop. He's kind of willing to trust him as long as he does his job. He's like, look, whatever, just do your job, we'll get along, that kind of thing. But everyone else on the police force hates this guy because
I was going to say he trusts him until he shows up at his house, and then he throws a fit.
Well, no, that's the very beginning of the movie, and
right.
He just didn't like that because he didn't like the fact that the neighborhood saw that. He didn't.
And I go, well, that scene to me, yeah, like that was. I don't even know. I don't know what they were going for. Like he's
prejudiced. He's not full on racist, but he does have unfound prejudices.
I did laugh. The one laugh I got out of what I saw was when he was like, "I'm trying to sell my house. Thanks."
Yeah, right. But before that scene, he was beating up a fairy that was in his bee killer, his bee zapper,
For the record, again, to bring up Max Landis, one of his last tweets before the controversy started was he was like, Will Smith ad-libbed the line, "Fairy lives don't matter."
Okay, well, he still ad-libbed it no matter what, and that comes across as very tone-deaf.
Right.
But it also comes off in a weird way as something about this character, and his views on policing. Like he's seen as like a good cop, but he's also seen as a very strict cop, like a cop who is not a snitch. He wants to keep his head down and his mouth shut, and he won't turn his back on other cops necessarily. Even if they're doing bad shit. Like he sees cops beating up orcs unnecessarily and brutally. He sees cops being racist. He sees cops profiling. He's just going along with it because he needs his pension. Meanwhile, the orc played by Joel Edgerton is very idealistic, a little naive.
That's his partner? That's his partner?
Yes.
That was Joel Edgerton as the orc?
That was Joel Edgerton.
Wow, I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah, it was a good makeup job, I think.
Yeah, okay, I'll agree with that.
In the sense that you couldn't tell it was Joel Edgerton. I mean,
I had no idea, but the scene in the beginning, the scene that sparks like the whole movie, where he's buying gyros or something, and he's like, "Hey, I got you one."
Oh right,
my favorite character was the orc partner because he just seemed like a nice guy.
In fact, that's probably the best part of this movie, if there is a best part, is that there's a good chemistry between the camaraderie of Joel Edgerton and Will Smith's characters.
Yeah, I can see that.
They have a good back and forth. Will Smith's like kind of annoyed by his partner, and his partner,
isn't it like it's like Dirty Harry, right?
A little bit. It's that classic cop trope, like I don't need a partner, that kind of thing. Except Will Smith wants a partner, but he just wants a human partner.
But doesn't Dirty Harry get paired up with a Mexican?
He gets paired up with, well, there is a Hispanic one. He gets paired up with a black person at one point.
That's what I'm saying. There's a prejudice
Partners
there.
usually either get murdered or they get, severely injured and knocked out of policing.
Right. He needs fresh partners every day. Yeah. No, this isn't quite like that, but there is a similarity in terms of the relationship between the two. The plot proper kicks off maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes into the movie after we get all these weird racial politics and cultural politics.
On the nose, racially.
That are very on the nose. Like the elves live in a part of town that's very wealthy and very fashionable and upper class, and all the orcs are working for them. Meanwhile, the orcs are living in slums. Some of them are gangsters. They wear sports jerseys,
which sounds to me like a slight commentary on an argument that I've seen many times about Lord of the Rings is that is that Lord of the Rings is pro-segregation because the armies of Sauron are actually very heavily racially integrated. You have the orcs fighting alongside the humans as mixed groups and stuff, versus in the case of the rest of the world, you have the humans here, the elves here, the dwarves here, and the twain shall ever meet.
Oh my god.
Okay, wow. Yeah.
And not to mention the fact that orcs are the only dark skin-toned characters within Lord of the Rings, so they're kind of symbolic of, Africa, whereas you also have the humans from the eastern reaches are all treated as very Far Eastern in style. So what I'm saying is Lord of the Rings be racist.
Okay, well, this movie, I guess, follows that trend a little bit, but it does so in a very, like we said, on the nose, heavy-handed and hard-headed way. Mm-hmm. Like, it just won't let it go. It's very stubborn about it. It's also it reminds me of a Neil Blomkamp movie, but without the subtlety, which there isn't much subtlety in a Blomkamp movie about social struggles and stuff. Those movies are very
to call it a less subtle Blomkamp movie says that there is zero subtlety whatsoever in this film.
Right, exactly. There's not a lot of subtlety in this movie. That being said, once the plot proper kicks off, which is basically the two cops finding magic wand in the slums and are basically in a race for their lives from the gangs, from the other orcs, from the bad cops, from basically everyone who wants the wand, and they want to bring it to the feds or to this department of the government that can handle the wand. So basically, it's one night where they have to stay alive to make it to the end, to give the wand over. And that's basically the movie. It's essentially through their journey together, they're gonna form a bond. The orc character is going to learn about himself and also maybe gain some respect from his community and from Will Smith. Will Smith's going to learn about being a better cop, being less guarded and all that stuff. It's very ho-hum in terms of character arcs, in terms of where it's heading.
Right.
All that stuff. The only hallmark of this movie that I would say is something that will keep your attention would be the action. The action is very well captured. It's very well shot, very well staged. A lot of good stunts, a lot of good gore whenever there is gore, which there is a lot. Noomi Rapace plays an evil elf and who's after the wand, and her scenes are particularly brutal. She just lays waste to a bunch of people. Smith has a lot of good one-liners. Some of them don't land, some of them do land, but he tries them all out. And his relationship with Joel Edgerton in the movie is very fun. I'll give it that. There's a good, like I said before, a good chemistry between those two. But other than all that, it's the politics of this movie is very problematic, and it doesn't really help that. What's the name of the production company? It's like it's something that's like an in-your-face name, right? Like Trigger Warning Productions or something. Like it's a very
What the fuck?
obvious political, response kind of thing, and it makes me think
This is the first I've heard of that. That's an awful name.
It makes me think that David Ayer is like out to just piss people off or something. Like, hey, snowflakes, watch my movie, bro. That kind of thing. And I wasn't on board with that. I don't mind pushing buttons or a movie that pushes buttons, but if it's doing it from a misguided and kind of lowly place, it's not good. That's not a good thing. It matters what people say and what people express, and what Ayer is expressing and saying here is very problematic in a lot of ways, tonally and even just outright in the dialogue. There's very little that maturity that goes on towards the end. I mean, it happens, but it's very little and few and far between, like I've said many times before. And
okay, I gotta just say this.
Yeah.
So I've been going through some reviews of this film, and
Okay.
David Ehrlich of IndieWire gave this.
He does a great review.
Yeah,
Ehrlich does a
gave
great
the film
review.
an F, calling it the worst film of 2017. And listen to this quote: "There's boring, there's bad, and then there's bright. A movie so profoundly awful that Republicans will probably try to pass it into law over Christmas break."
Yeah.
Okay.
I think he's being a little hyperbolic, but
Right.
or a lot hyperbolic. But at the same time, that's very, yeah, that's a good quote. At the same time, it's a very good line, and really there is a conservative edge to this movie that needs to be said, and needs to be talked about. It's a very, I would say it's a very edgy conservative edge. It's very edgy edge. It's an edgy edge. It's a little, I don't know. It's a little too happy about its own politics. It's kind of, this is a movie that's very much up its own ass. And thinks that it smells very nice up there. You know what I mean? And
I'm gonna
that's
say
never
one thing. You were talking about how Max Landis apparently says he disowned the script. I would believe that if it weren't for the fact that every other script Max Landis has written that's made into a movie
is up its own ass. Yeah.
Like every single I'm not a fan of Max Landis films because everyone that I've seen has fallen flat on its face for me.
I did like Chronicle. That's probably the only one of his that I actually did like.
You asked for this, so here it goes.
Okay.
So Chronicle, he says that he had 100%, like that's his script on the screen, and he's like, yes, blah blah blah. Every other movie that he's done, he says like, oh, there was interference, and I've only, maybe 70% or 30% of my script is what the movie ended up being. From what I've heard, the Dirk Gently show is like entirely he was in charge and was there with the editors and watch that show. I would argue that is the most pure Max Landis stuff that you're going to find outside of his YouTube videos where he talks about wrestling or Superman and
depending on how things
like
might shake out the next few days in terms of.
Oh no, the third season. I'm kissing the third season goodbye. It's not happening. But that's 2 seasons that they have done. This is so serious because I'm not at liberty to say like who did what or what happened as far as the controversy goes. But
Liberty, you mean you weren't there?
Oh no, yeah. I'm not talking like I have some authority or insight.
Not at liberty insinuates that you were there and you can't say anything.
I signed an agreement.
Either way, what I'm getting at is that I think the Dirk Gently stuff is more representative of Max Landis having complete control over a project, whereas almost everything he's done, I mean, Chronicle was him and Josh Trank, but he claims that was like that's the most representative of his work. And either way, I just wanted to plug that show because other people worked on it than him. Elijah Wood, Hannah Marks, Samuel Burnett, lots of talented people worked on that show.
And also on Bright, there was a makeup and special effects team that did not get credited for this movie.
Is there a reason for that?
No, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know if it was a contract dispute. I don't know if it was they just forgot to add them to the credits. I don't know what.
Okay.
But there were a lot of workers that are pissed off about that. Which it happens a lot occasionally with these movies. Like X-Men Origins Wolverine left off most of the New Orleans crew that helped out on making that movie.
Does that mean that they don't? Well, so if FX shows X-Men Origins Wolverine, do those people not get royalties for that?
I don't know if any of them ever get royalties for that stuff, but they just wanted the credit. They wanted to be properly, noted.
Yeah.
I haven't done that.
So Bright was not good.
Bright was very dim. Ooh.
So, speaking of dim,
yeah,
I have nothing.
What, Ferdinand?
We're going to talk about a movie that's not very dim. We're talking about a movie that's bright and shiny and stars.
And his name is John Cena.
Wow, that was loud.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I know, right?
If you're not familiar with the video, basically there's an internet meme that was going around.
You don't need to explain this.
Yeah, just anyway.
So anyway, Ferdinand stars John Cena.
It stars John Cena, and it's based on a children's book, which actually my sister-in-law gave me. So I'm going to read that, and I'll report on it next week and let you know how close it followed it, because I have no idea.
Okay.
I have read the book that Shrek's based on, and it has almost nothing to do with Shrek the movie. So
from the basic synopsis I read, it's kind of a similar thing where the basic premise is within there, but there's a lot of interpretation and things added. So
the guy, this is just a quick aside because I think you guys will find this interesting. We're Back, a Dinosaur Story is based on a children's book, and the guy that wrote that book disliked the movie so much that he wrote a sequel where those same dinosaur characters go to Hollywood, and it's just like a satirical thing.
Okay. Did that get made into a movie?
No, it didn't get made into a movie, but he had his little fun, and he poked, I don't know. I haven't read it, but I've been interested in it. I've just, when I'm rich someday, I'll be buying children's books and reading them as an old man in a rocking chair.
Have you
ever... So Ferdinand, starring John Cena.
Okay, so Ferdinand, starring John Cena. It's a animated film that had the unfortunate, the studio that made it made the unfortunate decision to have the distributors release a film set in Spain, so Spanish speaking, or at least a region that would be Spanish speaking. So it has that kind of Spanish speaking attitude to it. Releasing that film a few weeks.
Ken, I have a question. I have a quick question. Does it have a Spanish speaking aspect to it?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I know I was repeating myself.
Sorry. I didn't mean to bring up your train of thought. I just wanted to throw in a joke once.
Humiliation.
So.
All right, yeah.
So anyway, releasing a film of this, of like that, shortly after Coco, kind of a bad idea, especially because while Ferdinand's a solid movie, I thought it's not quite on the level of Coco. It's not as ambitious. Animation wise, it was done as a collaboration between 20th Century Fox Animation and Blue Sky Studios.
Which most Blue Sky films are, right?
Yeah, I believe so. I don't.
So now Disney is calling the shots on Blue Sky Studios as well. I didn't even think about that.
Are they? I don't know if they acquired them or not, but
I'm pretty sure. So like Blue Sky's done Ice Age, 20th Century Fox, Rio, 20th Century Fox. I think the Peanuts might have been 20th Century Fox.
That's interesting. I guess 20th Century Fox does own it, so yeah, Ice Age might very well be a Disney thing now.
Oh my God.
They'll probably just put it to bed because Ice Age has run its fucking course. Ice Age has run its collision course.
Yeah. So John Cena's a bull.
Yeah, so John Cena's a bull and Ferdinand.
He's a bull.
The animation's quality is, I would say, a few steps above, the Ice Age movies, but certainly not Pixar quality. But the plot of the film follows this bull, played by John Cena. I don't think we've established that yet. And basically, the bull. The film opens with Ferdinand the bull as a kid, and he's the only bull in the on the ranch who does not want to fight. All the bulls believe fighting is the way to fame and fortune. They want to be the one to fight the matador and kick the matador's ass. And I just, when that happens, I just have to ask the question, what's the matador?
Like what? Like philosophically? What? I'm not sure what you're asking here.
It's a pun, and also a reference to a Three Stooges short about bullfighting. So anyway,
okay.
I'm just failing on all cylinders here.
Sorry.
Nah, it's my own fucking fault.
It's sorry if it's going over our heads. I mean, I need to get into Three Stooges. Honestly, I'd like to.
It's been a while since I've seen a lot of Three Stooges stuff.
So Ferdinand does not want to fight. He'd rather hang out by the by the flowers, smell flowers all day, and just appreciate the surroundings. And his father one day goes off to the bullfight. He gets picked, and his father doesn't come back, and that kind of freaks out Ferdinand. So Ferdinand escapes and goes on the run and finds himself. He winds up in becoming sort of the pet of this little Spanish girl and her father. On their farm, and he gets to hang out and sniff flowers all day. But then one day, when the big flower festival is in town, he accidentally sits on a bee, and the bee sting makes him go apeshit and destroys the town, mostly through a comedy of errors. As a result, he gets picked up by the authorities and taken right back to the bullfighting arena. Where he is essentially, he's essentially forced to confront the fact that people still want him to fight, and it's it's sort of a fable. The plot is all about, fighting is not the answer, and of course there is they explore in a very PG way the fact that bullfighting is pretty fucked up because. There's really no fighting in bullfighting. It's really bull killing. The whole purpose of a bullfight is to slowly bleed a bull until he's no longer aggressive, and then killing him. That's so. Anyway, they explore that in the most PG way possible, and Ferdinand becomes he decides to kind of get his friends out of there. I enjoyed the movie. Kate McKinnon plays a goat who is supposed to be sort of like his trainer, training him to be a fighter. And she's pretty much your stereotypical like goofy side character. But it's a funny role. There's some other interesting voices. My problem with the movie is it has a real heart to it, but there are these elements of like DreamWorks level kind of pop culture reference humor that just do not have a place within the story they're trying to tell.
All right.
And
That's a children's film thing, and I think the logic behind that is like, oh, the parents will enjoy this joke.
right. Well, the thing is, there's enough humor in the film without it, and I have to congratulate John Cena for his performance because he manages to play a genuinely empathetic character, and very much against character because, I mean, John Cena being a pro wrestler, you would expect him to be the first one to volunteer to a fight.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
I mean,
Well,
unless
he's making his transition to film right now, if you don't know.
is John Cena making his transition to film? I didn't know. Is
Yeah,
he?
yeah.
He's been slowly
Oh,
doing
wait,
that.
in this-
Yeah.
What happened?
I'm being sarcastic and once again failing on all cylinders.
I heard silence. I didn't
Yeah,
hear
I
what
heard
you had said.
silence. We didn't hear what you said.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
Seriously, we
John
were-
Cena. John Cena slated to star in Michael Bay's Transformers spin-off movies, right?
The Bumblebee movie. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So yeah, John Cena's is going down that road of the Rock.
yeah. What what I think the world needs is another Transformers movie.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm not into that, but we'll see what happens.
So, The Shape of Water is a 2017 American fantasy drama film directed by Guillermo del Toro.
blah 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 blah.
What I'm saying is, clearly,
Transit, yeah.
clearly, you guys aren't up for chatting about Ferdinand, so we're moving on.
Honestly, I'm too tired to even chat about Shape of Water, and I love that fucking movie. I might just let you take the reins on this one. Shape of Water is great. It's probably going to make my end of the year list. Definitely going to make my end of the year list. My official favorites list possibly is number one.
The Shape of Water is a fucked up fairy tale, and in the
Delightfully so, in the best possible ways. Yes.
Guillermo del Toro has this wonderful. I don't think since Terry Gilliam has there been another filmmaker who is as capable of making a film a fairy tale for adults, where it just it has a moral compass to it that and a fable element that a fairy tale would have, but it does it within the context of exploring these very deep adult themes. That and there be some fish fucking.
Yeah, and it's very proud of that too. There's no shame in this movie. There's no with regards to that. There's no hiding it. She is having sex with a fish man.
Yes.
And she's doing it for pleasure and out of love too, which is okay because adults do that, and we should all acknowledge that.
And
well, maybe not with fish people, but you know what I mean. Like the greater thing is at that play is.
They do have a scene where they explain that he is in fact anatomically compatible, which is
she does the thing with her hands where she kind of separates her hand. Yeah, that was pretty funny. And what I loved about that scene is like Octavia Spencer's character was like, she just laughed it off. I would have been freaked the fuck out. I'd have been like, what?
I think by the time you've seen everything that she's seen in this movie,
nothing.
You're like,
yeah, right.
First of all, this movie is an actor's film, first and foremost. Yeah. Every actor in it gets a wonderful piece of business to do. Of course, the centerpiece being Sally Hawkins, whose performance playing mute, where she has no real dialogue of any extent. She has to portray it using sign language and facial expressions, body language,
Sure.
and she gives just a spectacular performance that way. And I don't think I've seen a more emotive performance from an actress this year. It really paid off. In addition, you have Michael Shannon as the villain, and once again, Michael Shannon playing to his strengths. I think more than anything, Shannon's greatest strength as an actor is the ability to play an authority figure who is at first incredibly intimidating, but as you learn more about him, it peels more layers when you find out that he's really like kind of impotent.
Yeah.
And that's what's great about it is just slowly watching him fly off the handles and lose more and more of his perceived power.
Well, he's not just as he's losing power and he's gaining more impotence, he's also decaying physically.
Oh God, I'm Bill. I'm just gonna say this.
Yeah.
The scene in which he talks about Samson and Delilah and the columns coming down.
Yeah.
Oh my God, is there a better single moment in 2017 film?
I don't know. I mean, there's few, but yeah, when he talks about that,
I'm not going to give away exactly what that means, Bill Leon, if you're listening, because this is a movie I recommend to anyone to watch.
Yeah.
It's so great. Richard Jenkins is also
He's particularly great, Richard Jenkins, in this. He plays a very kind of mild-mannered, aging artist who's also, homosexual, and
right.
but he has this love interest that he wants to be. Or he has a crush on the guy that runs the diner down the street, and he also has a longing. What's that?
Dixie Doug's.
Yes, and he also has a longing for something spectacular happening in his life. He's like, oh, everything that was supposed to have happened has already passed me by, and he's aging and all that stuff.
And he finally gets a chance to do something special with his life. And,
Yes,
and it's a very interesting thing. Outside of that, you also have Doug Jones, you have Michael Stuhlbarg, Octavia Spencer, all giving spectacular performances.
and again, they all have their one scene or even multiple scenes where they really shine. Spencer has a scene towards the end involving her character's husband. Stolberg has a couple of good scenes, one in which he's meeting some people in his apartment, and another where he's being confronted by Shannon. There's a lot of really good individual moments in this movie that amount to just great performances. If we're only talking about performance, of course.
Now, Doug Jones, I should mention, if you aren't familiar with him, because he appears in this film in that he is the creature.
He's the fish man, yeah.
Yeah, he's Gillman. And for those who don't know this, if you watched Hellboy, he was Abe Sapien.
Yes.
And
he's constantly used by Guillermo del Toro and to play his monster characters. Yeah,
I got to be that guy and say that when the whole Alabama governor thing was going on, people were like Doug Jones, and I was like, oh, Doug Jones from Hellboy.
Oh right, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
exactly.
Roy Moore.
But I just find it interesting because Abe Sapien is basically Gillman too. So he gets...
Yeah, it's clear that Guillermo has a real affection for the Universal monsters, specifically Gillman,
Oh, yeah.
That's really cool. I love the fact that these characters, Sally Hawkins and Richard Jenkins, live above a movie theater.
Yeah.
Not just a movie theater, a movie palace.
A movie palace that's starting to fail financially. There's a kind of an interesting moment in the film where the landlord who also owns the theater is like begging her to come to the theater because no one's coming.
Yeah, he's like, I'll give away tickets. I'll do this. I'll do that. Just come, you know.
And they kind of play a part in the downfall of that theater.
They do, but it's a very romantic way they do it, and it's a little sweet at the same time because that movie theater also represented a piece of the setting, which is the what was it? This took place in the 50s, right? The
Late 50s,
1950s.
I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, so this was a part of that changing period of time when the neighborhood movie theaters and the movie palaces all across the country were beginning to fall into disrepair, and the multiplexes, while that era doesn't quite happen for another few decades, is starting to creep up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the drive-ins are a thing at this point. Television is a thing. You know, these are fads, and people are, you know.
It actually, come to think of it, it has to be the early '60s. The reason being is I remember a reference being made to something to Michael Shannon's character taking part in the Korean War, and that being like more than 10 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So
I see.
it would have had to have been the early '60s.
I see. There's a lot in this movie about the outsiders or the perceived outsiders of society. You know, you got Sally Hawkins, who plays a mute. You've got Richard Jenkins, who plays an aging homosexual. You've got Octavia Spencer, who is an African American woman.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the Gill Man, who's just straight up an outsider because he's a fucking fish man. Yeah, right, exactly. You got all these different characters at play who are living in this very tumultuous time in American history. During the civil rights era, you know, the fight for civil rights, and things are changing. People aren't happy with it. A lot of people are happy with it. There's these differing, very aggressive viewpoints, and people aren't backing down. You know, one scene in particular, they're at the diner. Richard Jenkins is swooning over the diner owner, and he sees the owner act in a very jerkish way towards two African American customers. He's like, "No, takeout only. Don't sit down here. You order it over the phone and we'll get it to you." You know, that kind of thing.
Right.
And you know, that is repeated a couple more times in the movie by other characters, specifically Michael Shannon, who himself is very prejudiced and ignorant and you know, all that stuff. You know, he's just a big asshole. You know, he talks down to just about everyone because he's a white male, you know, living in America. He's got all the authority he needs, you know, despite being a government official. If he wasn't a government official, he'd still have that power, you know, of so-called authority over people just by that mere default. But his character is shown, like you said, slowly like an onion being peeled away at. And like I said, slowly decaying physically. Like literally, he is decaying as this movie progresses. He is revealed to be the real monster of the film and what he represents. There's this bit in the movie that I want to kind of highlight real quickly where he goes out to buy a car.
Yes.
He's really just looking at the cars, but he's also really wanting to buy a car. And the salesman kind of convinces him to get this really nice, you know, car. It's for the future and, you know, for the virile man and all of us, you know, that kind of thing. And he gets it. And he feels really good about it, you know. And he goes home to be with his family, and then he makes love with his wife, and he's doing so in a very aggressive way that's very unsettling.
Yes.
You know, and everything about him is unsettling.
Holding his hand over his wife's mouth and telling her
specifically the hand that's injured. He gets injured earlier in the movie, and his hand is injured and bleeding. And she's like, "You're bleeding, honey." He's like, "Shut up." I was like, "Oh God!"
It's like getting more and more grody over the course of the film and turning black.
They're like, "Dude, I can smell it." He's like, "Shut up."
And also, like, this is a movie that just every detail visually is just painstaking. There's a recurring theme of the color green throughout the film. Besides, you know, the Gill Man and his environment, there's Richard Jenkins is painting like a Jello advertisement, and the boss turns it down because he painted red Jello, and everyone's about green. Michael Shannon is seen multiple times in the film popping this hard candy, and the hard candy is green in color, and it's a nice little. I like when a director throws in those visual themes that connect everything.
Right, and of course, what does green represent in terms of this film? You know, that also brings out certain aspects and feelings towards the characters and towards the environment. My personal favorite visuals were two scenes. One was where the Gill Man is watching a movie in the movie palace, and Sally Hawkins comes down to visit and comfort him.
Mm-hmm.
And the other that was reminiscent to me of the scene that Orson Welles shot for his version of Don Quixote that's available on YouTube, where Don Quixote is watching a movie for the first time and he doesn't know that what's happening isn't actually happening.
Yeah.
So he gets up and starts fighting it.
Mm-hmm.
It reminded me of like that, except this was a little bit more like the Gill Man was just watching the images and kind of letting it soak over him. It was almost like a child watching a movie for the first time kind of thing. The second scene was kind of a dream sequence that Sally Hawkins is having. She's having dinner with Gilman, and she's trying to express to him how much she loves him, and then it turns into a musical number.
Right. It because she's unable to speak. The dream sequence is the only sequence in the film in which her character speaks, and she speaks via song, and it's weird. It comes out of nowhere. It is it's never referenced again, but
it's wonderful, isn't it? And it feels right at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
At the risk of sounding like a person who references obscure internet shit, it was this film's big-lipped alligator moment. Yes, no one's going to get that except for Bill Leon, I'm guessing.
Yeah, he's giving the thumbs up. There you go. He got that. So yeah, Shape of Water. This movie was a total delight. I mean, in every way. You know, I wouldn't recommend this to kids, but
this is the perfect movie to watch if you're trying to traumatize children.
Right. You know, this is definitely a rated R movie. However, if I were like a teen, or if I had a kid who was a teen, rather, I think I'd be okay with them watching it as long as they understood a few things beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this isn't like that far off of a movie, but it is something that needs to be put into perspective a little bit.
This is one of those movies where you know that the studios just don't know how to market it, because when the trailers that they had programmed to play before the movie were all over the map. I had a trailer for Paddington. I had a trailer for The Post. I had a trailer for like some Blumhouse horror movie, and it's like they have no idea who this is supposed to be aimed at.
And that's the funny thing about this movie, is that really it's such a Del Toro baby that while it's meant for adults specifically, like that's a very broad group, I know, but it's for adults. It's this weird monster of a film that is just absolutely beautiful and engaging. That
it's the rare Universal monster remake that
actually works. Yeah, right. I actually wrote something along the lines of it's too bad the Dark Universe didn't start with this.
Yeah, no kidding. I wish
if they went in a creative and clever and romantic direction, something completely different, then you would be thinking a movie that they would be a rehash of the Universal monsters would be, then this would have really kicked things off well.
My local theater is actually having an event in mid-January that they're going to be doing a twofer. They're going to show The Creature from the Black Lagoon and then The Shape of Water. I'm
nice.
Going to that.
I think you should. That should be fun. I like The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very, very fun movie.
If you're a fan of Guillermo del Toro's more creative kind of independent films, this is very much akin to films like The Devil's Backbone or Pan's Labyrinth or Kronos.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Very worth a look. And if you haven't seen any of those movies, see all of those movies.
Yep.
All right. So
I
I was actually just looking into some trivia here.
Okay.
It says here that this is the first English language film to win the Golden Lion at the Venice Film Festival since Somewhere. So it's been about 8 years.
Okay.
Yeah, and then another piece of interesting trivia here that intrigues me is that Michael Shannon and Michael Stuhlbarg also appeared in Boardwalk Empire together. And the thing that's unique about that is like this movie is also set in, it's that period. It's one of those things we're seeing. It's another excuse to see both of them wearing, dressed as like G-men basically, which is fascinating. But the difference is that what I'm saying is Boardwalk Empire needs Gilman.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Played by Steve Buscemi.
Oh yes, Steve Buscemi.
Get on it, Terrence Winter.
And also, according to IMDb's trivia page, after seeing the trailer, director Kevin Smith tweeted, "Seeing something as beautiful as this makes me feel stupid for ever calling myself a director."
Ugh,
Well, there you go, Smith. Yeah.
Always the martyr. You've
Yes.
done, Kevin Smith, you've done some good movies. You just at some point smoked too much weed and forgot how to make a good movie.
Killed off
Shots
those brain
fired.
cells. Yeah. And there you go.
Oh no, that's not shots fired. That's just stating a friggin' fact. All right. Night, everybody.
Good night.